Thanks. Now we've got Penny Shepherd from the UKSIF.
Hello, thanks very much, Eddie. So I come from the UK Sustainable Investment and Finance Association, and what I'm interested in is the role of new finance technologies in moving forward financial services that advance sustainable development, i.e. that deliver positive outcomes for environment, for society, for the economy. So I'm going to introduce UKSIF, the organisation I come from, talk a bit about sustainability and financial services, and then a bit about some of the challenges and opportunities in the area. But it's really as much about questions as about answers. So UKSIF is the UK's membership association for sustainable and responsible financial services. We have a bit over 250 members, including about 60 financial institutions. So we kind of go, well, we used to say we go from Barclays to WWF, but now we've got the Bank of London and the Middle East, so we go from the Bank of London and the Middle East through to WWF. But the core of our membership is financial institutions and the people who work within them. And what we do is provide a voice for that part of the industry. We bring our members together to talk to their stakeholders, and we network them as a cluster. This year it was our 20th anniversary, and what we use that as an opportunity to highlight that the last 20 years may have been interesting, but the next 20 years are even more significant, and let me explain why. But let me start by saying kind of why I'm here and why me, which is this is what I've been doing on and off for the last 15 years. But before that, I spent 20 years working in what was then called the computer industry, and particularly working with financial institutions. And so I take the knowledge of that time of working with financial institutions and bring it to the area of sustainable finance. So where do we start? We start with the quote that's probably, certainly for me, stuck most from the financial crisis, that not all innovation was socially useful. And as a result of that, in many ways, we've got a backlash against innovation in financial services. But from where we sit, what we actually need more innovation rather than less. But what we need is socially useful innovation. Innovation which works for the users of financial services and works for the surrounding environment. And why? Because this is where we're going. And this isn't information from me, it's information from a variety of international agencies that was pulled together a couple of years ago by the government's chief scientific advisor. And what he highlighted was that what we're looking towards is an increase in demand of about 50% for energy in the next 20 years, an increase of about 50% for food, an increase of about 30% for water, at the same time that we are adapting to and mitigating climate change. What that means is that we need, as individuals, need to shift over to living our lives differently, but it also means that we need to replumb our economies to be able to cope with that, and that what will be profitable in the future should be different from what was profitable in the past. So why is that relevant for financial services? Or rather, why are financial services relevant for that? Well, basically because that has significant implications for the three areas of what financial services deliver for the economy, what they deliver for the public good. The first thing that financial services do is efficiently allocate capital. And what we need is a huge change in how capital is allocated. The figures are sitting before you there, but in essence we need a huge shift into low carbon infrastructure and into the associated services around that. So we need a change of allocation of capital to support the transition to a low carbon resource efficient economy. We need mechanisms to value and therefore protect biodiversity and other natural resources. And we need better mechanisms, the one that's front of mind at the moment, better mechanisms for funding small businesses. Also on the risk mitigation area, we need mechanisms for pooling and managing the risks associated with climate change. And we need mechanisms for pooling and managing risks associated with social development, so issues like microinsurance and microfinance. And then finally, in a world of 9 billion people, there is still a vast number of people who don't have basic transaction processing services, and that's not just outside the UK, it's also about access to finance in the UK as well. So a huge need for financial services to support socially useful activity. But the challenge is, can today's finance sector respond? Or is it stuck in outdated ways of doing things? And I suppose here I bring my past IT background to this, of saying that I worked for IBM in the days when it was inconceivable that IBM would not dominate the IT industry. And the idea that there was this minor outfit called Microsoft and this equally minor outfit called Apple, who were completely irrelevant to the real world of corporate IT. You know, it was incredibly difficult to get your mindset out of the idea that, you know, IBM would continue to dominate the world, if you like, and that the real competitors were people like, Burroughs, Sperry Univac, ICL, I can't even remember the others. So I think similarly, the challenge for the existing finance sector is around, can it respond to the challenges of tomorrow? Or are there huge opportunities for others to come in? So one of the classic examples is the current investment chain, which is not good at looking to the long term and not good at looking to its impact on society as a whole. It isn't just me that's saying that. We also have a major review being done for bids at the moment by the economist John Kay, looking at the implication of the equity investment chain on the ability of corporate Britain to think for the long term. So, what's the potential for disruptive innovators to come in and change things? Well, you tell me, but here's just a few examples. I mean, some of these are the classic ones, and they in many ways build on some of what Adam was saying earlier. So, the number of times I have heard people say in the UK, you know, mobile phones, yes, you know, that's what we use mobile phones here for today, but if you go out to parts of Africa, mobile phones are fundamentally about cutting out the middleman in agricultural sales. So the M-Peso service is about being able to transfer the equivalent to money between people by phone in ways that actually enable them to benefit from their agricultural production in ways that weren't so before. One example. Similarly, you come upon Lend with Care. So Lend with Care is a bit like Kiva, if you come upon Kiva, in that it's a peer-to-peer below market rate lending mechanism. So you can go onto the website and you can lend a small amount of money to an entrepreneur in a developing country. And you can see who they are, what they want the money for, how far they've got in building up the total amount of money they need in small loans from people around the world. If they do well with their business, you get your money back. If they don't, you lose your money. If you get your money back, then hopefully you either take it back or hopefully you lend it to someone else. Today, it's not equivalent to putting itself into a building society or a bank the way building societies and banks were intended to work. It's probably just as good as some accounts that are out there at the moment. But in essence, it's a below the radar peer-to-peer lending mechanism that today a major bank would look at and say that's not a serious competitor to our real savings, but give it a few years, let it develop a track record, and who knows. Similarly, just looking around, I picked this up. So databases of ideas, a whole variety of ideas that people are finding within financial services. From where I sit, there's a huge opportunity here, which is about disintermediating financial services in a way to deliver socially useful innovation. The challenge is, will it happen? Who will do it? Will it be the existing players? Will it be new innovators? What do you think?
Hi, I'm Ian McKenna. I'm just interested to understand why you think the opportunity is to disintermediate, or why it might not be to re-intermediate. Because, in actual fact, quite frequently the middle people do add some value. I think you've got to be very careful what you're finding. You can cut out costs by taking out the middle people, but what value do you lose at the same time? Accepting that there may be different ways. Might it not more be a matter of looking at different ways of delivering the same value?
If you listen to what people like Adair Turner, the chairman of the FSA, is saying now, his analysis of the financial crisis and associated phenomenon are around current intermediation. A, is expensive, and secondly, in many instances, benefits the intermediaries in the supply chain at the expense of the providers and users of capital, to look at the investment chain at either end. Yes, you're right, in that one is probably talking about alternative ways to intermediate, but what one is looking for is alternatives to the current intermediation, which delivers better for the providers and users of capital, delivers better for the society that sits around it, and probably is cheaper as well, because it's certainly pretty expensive at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with all the above, but I think it is re-intermediate rather than disintermediate. I think that's how much you throw.
Yeah, all I would say there is that it's worth sort of starting from the base point of view. I mean, if you look at the M-Peso example, yes, it is providing, the Vodafone subsidiary is the intermediary in place of the middle person. But what that means is that instead of somebody having to sell their agricultural agricultural stuff to somebody else who then puts a markup on it and sends it on, the financial services process enables them to cut that bit out of the chain. So there's a sort of sense of, as you start to imagine it, some of it is the sort of thought process is about how do we get rid of as much as possible of the bit in the middle, I suspect. But also, as you say, how do you get a bit in the middle that works better?
Yeah, I think you need to understand where the value is in the bit in the middle first, then work out to reword it, restructure it. But maybe we agree to
Yeah, but some of what happens at the moment is that the bit in the middle values things over and above their actual value. So the current investment chain values liquidity to a degree which is actually unnecessary. And quite often it does it because the regulatory framework requires it, rather than because the genuine needs of the people at the other end do.
And there you hit the real challenge, because whatever you read, that's going to cover the regulatory framework. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's important, because one thing that's really important at the moment is that we have a regulatory framework that enables innovation rather than acting as a moat around the status quo.
How do you quantify the worth or goodness of an investment?
You mean, how do you quantify the social and environmental impact as well as the financial impact?
Yes.
Yes. And there are people working on methodologies for doing that. So, for example, there's a methodology called social return on investment that's looking at the social impact of particular investment approaches, particular sorts of investment. But yeah, it's part of the whole debate around you know, measuring the triple bottom line. But in a way, again, that's one of the opportunities and challenges, to be able to demonstrate to people the total impact of an investment or other use of a financial service, rather than just what is traditionally seen as the impact, which is the financial return coming back to you. I mean, sort of our model, in part, is the fair trade movement. You know, of moving from the only thing that matters about coffee is the taste, to what the taste still matters, but lots of other things matter as well.
Okay, great. Do you have a last question? Anyone? Okay, thank you very much, Penny.